One of the problems is being a wrestling fan at this time of, well, wrestling. It's so hard to find people that you actually want to talk to because I hate so many people that are fucking involved with wrestling. One of the few that I can actually tolerate, one of the better interviewers going. We get the great Hannibal on the show. Hannibal, how are you doing today?
Other than the weather is still very cold here in Canada, in my part of Canada, I'm doing fine.
Well, it's doing shit here in Ireland. It's the sun's starting to come out, which seems great, but when you've got Irish skin, you can go outside for 6 to 7 minutes, then blisters form, then you have to spend the rest of the 2 months in the house going, fucking cunts out there.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I've wrestled in England before, and I know that the weather over in the UK and Ireland area is not the greatest.
That's why everybody drinks so much because you just stay in the fucking bar and then you don't
Yeah.
get wet.
I think I actually set the record of how many consecutive days I drank in a row when I wrestled for Brian Dixon over there. A combination of the weather and being sick of wrestling every day in those holiday camps.
Well, as of course, to say in the intro, you're one of the few people that I actually like listening to their opinions on current pro wrestling because I mostly hate the fucking thing. Someone that I did read about, uh, who was like a journalist, just lost his job as of last night at the time of recording. That was the quite controversial Brad Shepard. So I guess the question I would have for you, Hannibal, is what's it like for you? Like when you do interviews on topics or on certain sources, you can go right to the person and say, "Hey, Sid, did this really happen?" Whereas other journalists can say, "Oh, the rumors of Sid," and just report fucking lies. So is that quite frustrating for you as a journalist, or or do you just think fuck them?
The people that act like rumors are true, you mean?
Mm.
Yeah, I'll try and go to the source. I'll try and ask the person directly if I know them and I hear something. But yeah, there's all kinds of things like that online that's obviously reported as true and isn't true.
Yeah, because the rumor is that his clickbait is what got him fired. Because it got to the point where it was so over the top ridiculous, where it's like, oh, Vince McMahon in talks to appear on Impact Wrestling. It's like, well, that's not true.
Yeah, the big one that I remember from a couple months ago was everyone trying to spread the rumor that WrestleMania was going to be moved to Madison Square Garden in June, and that was all over the place. And it made absolutely no sense. And that one really pissed me off because fans were like overloading me from all directions, telling me that bit of news when I knew obviously it wasn't going to happen. They weren't going to move it there. And as we know now, Madison Square Garden still isn't going to be open up even in August now because the New Japan show there in August was just canceled.
What's your take though on the clickbait channels on YouTube? Because there's a channel on there called Wrestle Maya, and that gives me a nervous breakdown every time I see it because it's got nearly 700,000 subscribers, and it's faker than fucking Mandy Rose's tits, and it's just
Yeah, I don't really watch them. I try and get my news and information from more credible sources than those, unless it's becoming a big deal. I will maybe watch the video where the person is making the allegations, but I don't typically watch those type of news channels, to be honest with you.
well, see, those types of channels, I think, play on the mental illness of some wrestling marks, which it brings me to my next topic. And that last night there was a comedian called Tom Segura, or whatever, referred to as wrestling fans as, no offense to anybody listening or watching, he said wrestling fans are retards. Uh, that's a direct quote. Uh, he came up with an amazing observation. Now, this is groundbreaking stuff. He should be a detective. That a lot of fans think wrestling is real, and he pointed out that it's fake, which I found to be fascinating that he found that information out. Uh, what's your take on people like Tom Segura and then the kind of strange fan reaction to it?
Well, I like wrestling fans, obviously. I am pretty much a full-time YouTuber. I still do have a regular job, but that's closed now. So I'm lucky that I have YouTube income coming in. So I definitely appreciate wrestling fans for watching my videos and also here in Canada going to the Great North Wrestling events that I promote. As far as the wrestling fans that get offended when you say it's fake, when you have the Joey Ryans of the worlds out there doing the thing where people are taking moves from his genitals, when you have the invisible bombs going off, when you have Joey Janela doing the social distancing matches, when you have wrestlers evaporating into thin air in WrestleMania and teleporting. From what I understand, Matt Hardy's doing teleportations on AEW. I can't really defend people that call it fake, even though I can tell you the difference, everyone has a different style. Obviously, Joey Ryan isn't doing a lot of really intense wrestling, the dungeon style that I learned, or the Japanese hard hitting style that I do. But the style I do does actually hurt. I've been hurt a lot more in some wrestling matches than I have been in real fights. But in wrestling, you're allowing some of that stuff to happen to you, but I can't defend it anymore. When you have like the main event of WrestleMania, people are evaporating into thin air and teleporting. How can I defend it and say, no, it's real? I just can't. But all I can say is a lot of people that call it fake, they would charge me with assault if they were to experience a match with me. I have been called, I've had several people in bars that have told me wrestling's fake in the past, and I've offered to chop them, and they've allowed me to chop them. And then, literally, a couple of those times, the police have been called because these people then get chopped and they want to call me for assault. So, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, you can't really defend it anymore. But as far as my style, I won't ever do any of that cheesy stuff. And even Ronda Rousey saying it's fake. I mean, she has all of her matches choreographed. So it's a lot different than someone that's come up through the independents, wrestled some of the. If you wrestle a shitty wrestler, some of the times you got to pretty much fight for real because they're stiffing you. They don't know what they're doing. They're punching you in the head. So it turns into a real fight. Ronda Rousey, for instance, she's only been gone in there against like highly trained professionals in choreographed matches. So of course, she's going to be more on the side of calling it fake. And of course, I haven't seen too much of her in the ring, but apparently she wasn't that great. So the fans got on her case. So she also couldn't take the heat from that standpoint. But she also claims she wrestled 150 times a year. I don't think she ever wrestled 150 times a year. Highly doubt that. Don't recall her ever being on the road for all house shows. Maybe maybe a house show here and there if it was a big town, but a lot of what she said was bullshit too.
Yeah, and let's be honest, she's the most overrated MMA fighter in history. She beat the shit out of a lot of people who weren't full time professionals, and the first full timer she really fought was Holly Holm, who beat the fuck out of her. And then Amanda Nunez, who's almost as tough as I am, and she fucking destroyed her in seconds.
Yeah, and they even protected her in that Amanda Nunes fight. I mean, the referee stopped it. If it was like a lower fighter that wasn't a star, they probably would have let Amanda get a couple more hits in before they stopped the fight. But it seemed Ronda didn't even want to be in the cage. It's hard though, too. I understand when you become a Hollywood star and a multi-billionaire, it's hard to be motivated to want to train, to get in fights and have your brain rocked and be hit in the head for real. So I understand she lost the eye of the tiger, so to speak, by those last two fights as well.
Well, you mentioned brain rot, and that brings me to the next topic I want to talk about. One of the best interviews you've ever done on your YouTube channel, Hannibal TV. It's actually one of the most recent ones as well, with the great Buff Bagwell. Now,
Oh yes.
yeah, now,
You know what? I take so many people like get on my case about that interview, but overall, like the clips of it got excellent hits. And from my standpoint, you do interviews. I'm sure you've known what a lot of wrestlers are like. They won't actually show up when you plan a time. And I had that issue with Buff. I had already paid him because I pay a lot of the wrestlers I do an interview because they won't do it otherwise. He didn't show up for his first interview and he was very flaky about actually doing the second one. So for the people that say, "Oh, Hannibal, you really never should have displayed him like that." um, I had to get my money back. And what am I going to say when he finally shows up for the interview? I don't think you're in any condition to do the interview. Let's do it another day. Then I'll probably never get it. He'd be like, "Fuck you, I'm keeping your money." But he admitted in the interview he wasn't handling the lockdown well and he was buzzed. He's always known to be a pill guy. So I'm sure he took a couple pills, but that interview was done at like 11 a.m. in the morning. For the people that allege that he was drunk, I'm pretty positive he probably only woke up shortly before that interview. He doesn't seem like an early riser to me.
well, I don't want to expose myself too much, but from personal experience, I could kind of detect what he was on. Because the thing, like, there's that time when he's speaking about Conrad Thompson, and he goes, "I paid out of my own money," and when he said that, it's like, right, MDMA, possibly a little dab of coke here and there.
Yeah, well, the other thing is too, his girlfriend that he lives with now, he's not computer friendly. So his girlfriend who was sober, because she took like 15 minutes, talked to me on Skype before he went on camera. And I think if he was overly fucked up, she was sober enough, she wouldn't have allowed him on camera. But yeah, he he didn't hide it. He said he was on something. I did the best I could. I still found it entertaining. Obviously, tens of thousands of people have watched the clips. If people don't like it, they can just simply not watch. But I didn't mind it. I would actually interview Buff again because there's stuff we didn't cover in that. What people also don't know is usually you're given time limits with wrestlers. So a lot of times when they say, "Why didn't you ask this? Why didn't you ask that?" Well, you only have a certain amount of time. You got to get in what you can, and sometimes they get long-winded and off topic. You got to bring them back so you don't get all the questions in sometimes.
With Buff though, and especially that Conrad topic, did you think he was being sort of straight up, or do you think he was maybe telling his "I'm innocent," like a Shaggy version? It was a me.
Well, I personally don't really like Conrad for the standpoint that on many of his podcasts, he quotes interviews from me. Like, for instance, when he was talking about the Vader stabbing, I'm not gonna lie, I listen to a lot of his podcasts. I'm a big Jim Ross fan. That's one of the ones I listen to. At one point, I was listening to the Bruce Pritchard, but being an interviewer, at one point, I just realized that he lies way too much. There's no point listening to a podcast that's mostly fabricated stories. But there's a few things I don't like about Conrad, that he quotes stuff from my interviews and he never says this is from the Hannibal TV, which is just simple respect. Steve Austin has quoted stuff from my interviews and he's given me credit and he's one of the biggest stars of all time in wrestling. I noticed that the Keeping It 100 with Conan that used a clip of Buff, they credited me. So I find it disrespectful when he doesn't credit me. But also, there was a podcast that Conrad did with Jim Ross recently, and Rene Dupree is a friend of mine, and they told a story about Pat Patterson and Sylvain Grenier, where they basically just ripped They basically put Rene Dupree in Sylvain Grenier's place because they had him confused. Like Rene has never been close with Pat Patterson. So they told this story where they just brutalized Rene Dupree. And it was really Sylvain Grenier. And I tweeted Jim Ross about it. And he retweeted, yeah, sorry, it was Sylvain Grenier. But then the next week on the podcast, they never made any correction like, oh, yeah, we just threw this guy under the bridge, alluded that there was a special relationship with him and Pat Patterson and basically all this stuff. And then they never corrected themselves.
Do you think that there's like a big backlash coming towards Conrad because it seems to be there's a growing dislike against him? Like, I'm keeping it 100. If there's one clip where he's in any way criticized, that's going to get a minimum of 10,000 hits.
Well, I don't really plan to go after him because I don't want to give him the publicity. Obviously, the bigger you get, the more popular you get, the more you're going to be criticized. I do believe there might be some truth to the Buff Bagwell's story. But on the other hand, the main point about Buff Bagwell's story is there was a big display made out of how they collected the money from him. Like they made a big scene of it. And I think that part of the story is probably true. They probably could have handled it a little bit more discreet, whatever the issue is with Buff. But yeah, the more podcasts Conrad does, obviously more people are going to go after him. Just like me, I've noticed the more popular the Hannibal TV gets, I have people taking shots at me. But as I said, I listen to various podcasts of his. I can't say that he's a poor interviewer or anything. He does do some fucked up stuff. Like if I had made a mistake like that and like completely thrown someone under the bridge and tarnished their name, a guy that's still on the indie circuit trying to make a living, and I allude that he's a piece of shit, I'll make the correction or I'll remove the video. I probably will do both
Mm.
just because I have respect for people. So I don't have respect for him in that way, but I don't particularly hate him or anything like that. So, but yeah, more and more people are gonna obviously come out about him as time goes on. I have heard though that there was a bunch of issues at the Starcast, which was one of the reasons allegedly that when they were planning to do the most recent AEW pay per view, there was not going to be any Starcast associated with it even before the lockdown.
Well, you wouldn't fucking catch me at it. Somebody who was at the last Starcast was also one of your more viral hits, and it just blew the fuck up. Mark Miro. I always fucking loved him. When I was a kid, I seen the WCW show where he wrestled. What was it? Vinny Vegas, who's now Kevin Nash, and I'm a total NWO mark. At any point during that Mark Miro interview, when he was talking about Sable, did you ever feel like going, "Shut the fuck up! You got to bang her. I hope you die of coronavirus."
uh, you know what? I thought the hardest part of that Mark Marrow interview, and I wish I'd had more time on it, but he was another guy that was made it clear he was going to be very strict on his time. Was he does this speech. He's a motivational speaker, which by the way, he told me he's paid $4,000 per appearance. So for everyone that says, "Oh, I agree," okay, I'm not saying he's a bad guy or anything, but he does do these appearances for the money. But the hardest part was he was breaking him from his like standard speech that he tells every day, every week. He wanted to, I noticed he didn't really want to answer my questions. When I started throwing questions at him, he would like quickly answer them and go back into his general speech about his life that he gives every day. I would have liked to have asked him more about his career as Johnny B. Bad and more about his personal career. But yes, the topic does often turn to Sable. And I do, you know what? He is a great guy, but you know what? It makes my stomach turn because with what happened with Brock and Sable, like if somebody did that to me, man, I'd be fucking pissed. I would at least say I don't want to talk about it, but I wouldn't go and say like, "Oh, good for them. They're very happy." Blah 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 blah. That just makes my stomach turn as a man because I understand being positive, but to have a guy basically steal your wife while you're at home looking after the wife's kid, and you got your wife in the wrestling business to begin with, to be so positive about the whole underhanded crap that went on there kind of disgusts me because they could have just broken up with Mark. Sable could have broken up with Mark over that. And I could understand if Brock said, hey, man, sorry, we fell in love. It's just the way things fall into place. But the whole point that Brock and him never even talked about it, it's like whether I could beat up Brock or not, I would have still tried to fight him over that.
Yeah, I just can't wait for the day that the Jim Ross interviews Mark Miro because JR is kind of infamous for his, let's just say, getting into the sexual side of crashes. We'd be like, Mark Miro, when you came to the WWE as a wild man with Sable and you got in a feud with Steve Austin, the only question that comes to mind is, the Sable taking up the ass?
Well, Jim Ross actually did interview Mark. He did interview Mark. He didn't go there. I That's the one thing, going back to Conrad for a second. That's the one thing that turns me off about some of the Conrad's podcasts is that we have to hear so much about Jim Ross's dick and Jim Ross's sex life and Eric Bischoff's fucking his wife. It's like, ugh, this is disgusting. I don't want to hear about this shit.
Yeah, we want to hear him about fucking Kimberly.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to hear stories about Kimberly Page's sex life, she's on my list, by the way. If anyone out there can hook me up with how to interview her, I'd love to get an interview with her.
Well, another guy he interviewed, and luckily I've actually interviewed him in the past, and he scared the living shit out of me because he's the largest person I've ever seen. Was Sid. One of the things though about Sid, and I can say this because I'm a chicken shit and I'll never see him in person, and I'm the other side of the world. His answers change per interview. And it's always a case of I didn't do anything wrong and everybody else is stupid. No one listened to me. Uh, when interviewing someone like Sid, what's that like for you? Because you were in person and he could have grabbed you.
Well, I actually like Sid. He's been one of our biggest draws in Great North Wrestling. I've been using him on my events here since 2007. And unlike what people want to believe, he was a big draw. Like he's one of the biggest draws we've ever had in Great North Wrestling. We always get big crowds for him. And I have wrestled him and I have hung out with him outside of wrestling. So I do consider him a friend. He's a funny guy. I understand why people don't like him, uh, but I've never really had any issues. But I understand how people could have issues with him. But I also think that he was never used to his full potential. I remember specifically, I was at this show, but there is a video on YouTube of him as a baby face wrestling the Blacktop Bully on a WWE TV taping. It was the not Blacktop Bully, Big Billy Busick, and it was Big Bill Bully Busick's last match in WWE, and it was at a TV taping in Cornwall, Ontario. And I've been in the arenas when Hulk Hogan was there during his prime years, and I just remember being in the arena that night for that match, and Sid was a massive baby face and the crowd was going absolutely berserk. People could look that match up. It is on YouTube. So I do believe if he had actually stayed in WWE and went with the push of being the next Hulk Hogan, it actually could have worked. But from what I understand, it was a combination. He didn't really want to be a babyface. And then he was flipping back and forth WWE, WCW, WWE, WCW. So he never actually got the good push, and also he had reliability issues and he was not the easiest guy to deal with. I do believe that like his story about the Ultimate Warrior is true. I do believe that after having a job to the Ultimate Warrior, that he did probably quit the WWE that time over that, because I know the type of personality Sid is. And obviously, he could make huge money in WCW. The steroid thing, I do believe that they do throw that at some people when they know that they're going to quit or they're having issues. Suddenly, they'll throw in a steroid flunk test.
How is it for you out of all the interviews you've ever done that when you know one's going badly? Because one of the what I like to do on this podcast, I mix it up from comedians to wrestling to boxing to music, and I've had some Hollywood writer interviews and things. The ones with the comedians, I would say 4 out of 10 times are a disaster because if they make a joke that you don't laugh really hard at, the mood is done. Or if I make a joke that's funny, it's like fuck him. So how is it for you when you're doing an interview and you can tell, oh shit, this is going bad?
Well, it's only happened a few times, luckily for me. And when it goes bad, it's usually because people like I would say two that really stand out to me that went bad were Juventud Guerrera and Carlito, where they're just giving, you can tell they don't want to be there, and they're giving like one sentence answers to all of your questions. That's where it's just like, fuck. They've gone through 3 pages of questions in 15 minutes. I paid them for an hour. How am I going to get through this extra 45 minutes that I've paid for? Those are the frustrating ones. And in those cases, I just never deal with those type of people again. But at least Carlito was polite. Juventud was a massive asshole. So as I said, I don't. I think I've done pretty well. Nikolai Volkov, as much as, for instance, everybody was great. The same line for everything. Everyone was great, wonderful to work with. Although that one was kind of frustrating because I had paid him a decent sum for that interview, and I felt like he was given the same answer. In the end, he passed away shortly after, and that's the only career interview he did, and it still gets big hits to this day. So even though it felt bad at the time, it ended up being highly viewed. So I haven't had that many. Obviously, you're right about the comedians. I've interviewed a few comedians, and it's the same thing. But in those cases, if it's a comedian, I'm usually doing it just to be nice as a personal favor to somebody. So I know it's not going to be a huge hit video.
One of the ones that I remember watching on your channel that frustrated me was with Rick Steiner because there was these great topics, but he would give half a minute answers, and it's like, see, Rick, could you delve a bit? But you don't want to say that because he could be
Yeah.
fucking yeah.
Yeah, and I believe I was also wrestling him that night, the same night I did that interview with Rick Steiner. So it's like you don't want to harass the guy too much because you want him to be cooperative in the match. But yeah, you're right about that. But back to the Carlito one for a second. It's like he feuded with Ric Flair for a while, and like I know it's his gimmick, but I asked him like, what was it like working with Ric Flair? Oh, that was cool. Any other memories of it? No, not really. It's like you wrestled Ric Flair. That's the best you could tell me. It was cool.
But
But
that's probably the attitude that got him a lot of backstage hate.
oh yeah, I mean I'll be perfectly honest, he seems lazy. Like he probably could have gone back to WWE too, but he's lazy. I have to say though, he was good in the ring that night because he also wrestled for us in Great North Wrestling that night. He did try hard in the ring, but as far as like putting a little bit of an effort in the shoot interview, which you know is part of my business, I mean, I'm better known for the Hannibal TV than I am even for my wrestling company now. So to not like, if he had put more effort into that shoot interview, for instance, and been entertaining, we would have used him again because it's like, okay, we'll bring you back. You did a good match, but we know we're going to get a good interview out of you. But if someone does a shitty interview, it's like, well, we know we can't interview you, and that's part of the reason why we're spending all this money bringing you in. So they do kind of screw themselves over. But yeah, I agree with that about Carlito. I mean, he just doesn't, he's too laid back. And that's probably what got him in WWE, why he didn't have a longer run.
And it's like that whole thing that they would call the Howard Stern effect, or I can't pronounce that name. Howie, call him Howard Stern. Uh, People knew that if you go on that show, there's certain things you kind of have to talk about, and if you don't want to talk about them, don't go on the fucking show, because if not, then it can turn people off you. And if you don't want to, if you know what you're doing when you're doing a shoot, then fucking do it.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I learned my lesson there with Carlito, and as I said, I don't mind him as a person. Like I'm not taking anything away from him. He's a nice guy. He showed up. He didn't ditch me on the show, but I was disappointed in that because a lot of fans were looking forward to that interview, and it was a short one with little effort put in. So whatever. As I said, it doesn't happen too often, thank God. There is other instances like Teddy Hart, for instance. There were I did one good interview with him, but then the second interview I did with him, he only did half an hour of the scheduled hour. So, like for instance, that one was a live interview, and a lot of people have seen like it was. I've come out about all my incidents. We did a thing where Teddy and I had a fight um, during our the first part of the interview, but Rene Dupree was also on stage. So the deal was Ted and I were going to have this argument. I was going to storm out, and Rene was going to finish the interview. But it became clear to Rene that Ted was not being cooperative. So then Rene left, and Wes Briscoe, one of my partners, was like, well, Ted's not answering any Renee's questions. Renee just left. That was shoot. Renee was insulted. He left the stage. So then my partner's like, get Wes, try and salvage this. And then Wes goes on and he wasn't cooperating with Wes. So he got a payment for an hour interview, but he only ended up doing half an hour and he didn't even hit any of the topics that I had given Renee to like finish the question on. So there is also stuff like that where the guys don't finish the interview. It happened with Juventud too. At the 45-minute mark, or not, he was supposed to. He's paid for an hour. It was somewhere between half an hour and 45 minutes. He starts tapping his foot, like hey, I'm ready to go here, finish up. And it's like, what the fuck, man? I paid you for an hour. And that night, he wasn't wrestling for me. He was wrestling for another company. And I know for a fact he got the same pay for his interview as he did to wrestle that night. And the interview's a lot easier. So, man, just answer my questions, answer the fan questions. Don't be so difficult, but whatever.
Yeah, I
I know
did it.
why they had issues with him in WCW.
Yeah. I did an interview with the guy recently, a wrestler. He's the son of a famous wrestler. And I'm not, and I couldn't actually see him because it was by audio, but you could audibly hear in the background this, and
Oh
then
boy.
like you could hear it, and I thought, well, maybe that's just me. But then somebody else interviewed Brian Pillman Jr. Oops, a few weeks later on, and you could hear the same noise on that interview, and I thought maybe it's the flu and it just sounds bad, but it he sounded high as a fucking kite, allegedly.
I've never met Brian Pillman Jr. Oh my God, I'm looking out my window now. It's actually snowing here. This is crazy. I think I'm gonna cry. I might start crying. But yeah, I never actually met Brian. We were gonna use him actually on a Great North Wrestling event this year, but because of the lockdown, that event ended up being canceled. So I can't say I've had any dealings with him, but that's a funny story. But me personally, I don't care if people are high, people are drunk. I'd rather have a drunk person talking a lot than a guy giving short answers.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, Marty Jannetty, one of my favorite interviews was Marty Jannetty, who I don't think was drunk, by the way, because I was with him for 3 hours and I never saw him take a drink during that time. I do know he took a break to get high from smoking weed, but I love how no matter how fucked up they are, everyone always assumes it's alcohol. But Marty, I thought was interesting. No matter whatever it was, if it was because he got high or whatever, it made the interview funny.
Well, just as we're slowly beginning to wrap up, we're going to change topics from interviews to sort of current rumors slash nice clickbaity headlines for me. The current controversy that came out of WrestleMania was that Roman Reigns, no, well, not no showed it, but he basically told him, "I'm not doing it."
He
Which
showed up at it, yeah, and then said that, right? He showed up. He was on site.
really,
Oh yeah, I just finished listening to Dave Meltzer talking about this literally just before I did this interview with you because I'm trying to put together my own news report for today. And he showed up on site. He was on site to do his match. Something happened that he left. And then, as we saw, he did put out a WWE never mentioned that he wasn't going to be on WrestleMania, even though that match was supposed to have been recorded that day. And I guess they kept trying to put the match together, even though they had already filmed the backup match. And then, I'm sure you remember this, Roman Reigns put out that cell phone video. I think he had headphones on and I think he had sunglasses and a hat, but I can go back and watch it. And he said that due to his family and the health issues, he wasn't going to put himself at risk. And then now, a couple days ago, yesterday, a few days ago, he's now saying this is all because he had twins. So it's like, what is it? You said at first it was your health issue and you were on site. So if you were on site, why didn't you just do the match?
uh,
And now it's because you had twins. So I think he makes 4 or 5 million a year. I know Forbes put out a list. I actually think it's 5 million a year. It's his choice. They give them choices whether they want to wrestle in the lockdown or not, but maybe they put some pressure on him to say it was for a reason other than the dangers. Who knows?
do you think that this is going to be a long lasting hate between him and Vince, or do you think he's gonna Vince is going to realize, oh, this is business at the end of the day?
Oh, well, I think that him coming out and saying that it's now because of his twins, even though he put that video out originally saying it was for health reasons, is a sign that, hey, he's trying to like smooth things over. And he's getting 5 million a year. Obviously, he doesn't want to lose that job. Obviously, whatever the issue is, it's going to be worked out. But we know that as much as WWE says, oh, people can take the time off, didn't one guy that was part of the recent firings, wasn't he one of those guys, from what I understand, was one of the people that said they weren't going to wrestle during the lockdown?
Yeah,
So obviously, me as a booker, I would find that would piss me off a little bit too, as much as I hate to say it. Like if I had plans for, let's say, it's rumored that Sami Zayn is one of the people that are saying no to wrestle during this. I put the Intercontinental title on him. He's supposed to defend it, but he's saying he doesn't want to wrestle during the lockdown. You have to know that's going to get him some heat.
yeah. But the other thing is, a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed this man called Mark Bernardin, and he's like a Hollywood writer. He writes on that fucking Star Trek TV show, Picard.
Yeah,
And we were talking off mic, and he said, because he knows that I like wrestling, Roman Reigns is in Thor 4. So that's probably going to get Vince to end the hate. Because, like, wait, now we've got a movie star guy.
yeah. Oh yeah. I don't think the hate's. I think it's probably overblown. And as I said, I think him coming out and saying this is because of twins, it kind of puts the heat down that, oh, no, they wanted to make me wrestle. Well, I have leukemia. My immune system's harmed, might be at risk. So now he's come out and said, no, it's not about this. This is about I had twins. I think that's a sign they're trying to kill the heat, that there's another reason, even though he did say that. Did you see the video? I mean, it
Yeah,
came out a few days before. He did initially say it was health reasons.
Another topic I'd love to ask you about, and this is one that always gets YouTube riled up, so it's always fun to see the responses. But um, uh, my era of wrestling from my super markdom days was from about 95 until, well, let's be honest, about 91 up until 2001. And then with school and social life, went from being a mega mark to just sort of a casual mark. Uh, Back in those later days, Triple H was a total hate figure online. Just, oh, he's always booking himself to go over, and he's in every angle, and everybody's doing this. There's too much focus on him. I hate him. Uh, the modern day version of that is, in my opinion, Cody Rhodes, and he gets zero online shit for it. Where everybody debuts against him in an angle. Every TV shows him cutting a 50-hour promo and doing the crazy spots and the bumps and the fucking angles and the debuts, and everything's Cody, Cody, Cody. And there's no complaint on him at all. So the question I have for you then is, what do you think of Cody making AEW so much about himself, despite the fact that his booking plan is not drawn like they had hoped?
No, I mean their interest in AEW has gone down. We saw that the arenas were not being instant sellouts anymore. The arenas were sometimes less than half full before the lockdown. Ratings aren't dropping at the rate of WWE, but the ratings for AEW aren't getting better. They're still in the 0.2s. They're rarely getting out of the 0.2s. I think AEW is lucky to have Chris Jericho because he's big star power, and I think he's the reason a lot of the. Well, actually, I think 25 times AEW has beat NXT to NXT only beat them 5 times in viewership. NXT only beat them 1 time in the 18 to 49 rating. But Cody Rhodes, I do think he's overrated. I don't think he's as nice a guy as people say he is. I remember when he was doing independent shows, we were looking at booking him in Great North Wrestling. Part of his deal was he had to win. He could not win by count out or DQ either. He had to pin the guy. I mean, those were some of his demands. And then we see he's let some people put him over in AEW, so he seems nice. But when he was going around on the indie scenes, that was his deal. He had to win by pinfall. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I've never met him, but as you brought up, they're not getting any more popular. But they have a minority of fans that absolutely love them and think that Cody can do no wrong. But I think we've seen from the booking, if the booking was any good, wouldn't we see an increase?
Uh, and the thing is, I really don't like Cody Rhodes because, as I've mentioned, I work for the Keeping It 100 podcast, and he has banned their roster from appearing on the show. And he had Conrad pull Disco Inferno's appearance at a Starcast because he's a cunt and he's no balls, and I don't think he's got what it takes to say any of that shit to someone's face. Fuck him. And but the thing is as well with the way you said about him putting people over in AEW. I don't think he's put anyone over. I think he's lost matches, but then the next day, it's then Cody in a new program, and it's all about him again. Well, like who was it he beat? MJF beat him, and then has done nothing since. While Cody's in another feud with another debuting person, he's a shithead. Plus, I met him once at a show in Dublin, and I was surprised that how small he was. I thought he would have been bigger. I could have taken him. I couldn't really take him, but you know.
Yeah, I think he's reached his peak in popularity. He's lucky that he's Dusty's son, but I don't think he's going to eclipse Dusty by any stretch.
He is not. And just the final topic I want to ask you about, because I had a conversation a few weeks ago with Don Tony from the infamous Don Tony Kevin Castle show. We spoke about a lot of rumors and famous scandals from wrestling. And then Dark Side of the Ring ripped me off, so they're going to get sued. But Macho Man Randy Savage and Stephanie McMahon That's my favorite rumor ever because I think it's a load of shit. Uh, what's your take on that infamous rumor?
Well, as I say, I can't disclose it because I was told on a ride with him, but Lanny once told me the story, and yeah, I can't disclose what he told me. But I did post a clip recently about Gorgeous George, Macho Man's ex-girlfriend, when I asked her about that, which is on the Hannibal TV, if anyone wants to look that up. Gorgeous George on the Stephanie Randy rumors. I do find it interesting, though, that out of all the people from WCW, they never brought him back for whatever reason. And it wasn't until he was dead that they wanted to put him in the Hall of Fame thing happened through Lanny.
See, the thing about that that's weird is that Randy's not Randy, I didn't know him. Macho Man's WCW contract ran out in '96, and he was in talks to come back, but then WCW had the Ted Turner money, and he was like, "Fuck that, brother, I'm staying." So but and plus I would assume that if it's true, and Vince McMahon knew that this guy working for the rival company, then he would say, "Yo, they hire pedophiles, fuck them and shut them down." So I just think that it's a fantastic rumor, but I just can't believe it.
Who knows? David Penzer did say that he had a much younger sister, and back in the WCW days, they had like an ongoing thing between Randy and Penzer that Randy would always ask about the sister and like as if he had a crush on the sister, but it was like done in a jokingly way. Hey, how's your sister doing, Penzer? But she was like 16 or 17 at the time. But I don't know. I'm not saying who knows. I'm not saying that saying anything, but I do know that Stephanie likes big guy. Obviously, she married Triple H, but I knew a guy. I bounced with a guy that was a football player at her college, and used to bang her. And she actually confirmed that because when I met Stephanie, I brought up this guy's name, and she even in the when I bounced with this guy, it was around 2002, and even in 2002, whenever WWE came to town, he would get free tickets through Stephanie. They still had a friendly relationship. But when I met Stephanie for the first time, I brought up his name. I said, like, I'm friends with a guy you know. I didn't say I'm friends with a guy I used to fuck, but he had the similar build. So she's definitely attracted to like the bodybuilder types. So that's all I know. I know that my friend definitely fucked her.
Did he have any details on her, or is that as far as he went?
That was before I was really much of a reporter. He said she was cool, uh, and the sex was good. He enjoyed fucking. She actually even flew to my town apparently a few times, like to have their little escapades. So they were pretty. They enjoyed each other, I guess, for a while. But he said she was cool. He didn't have anything bad to say about her. And obviously, when I met her, I think that may have fucked me over at that tryout to bring that up in retrospect. But she definitely confirmed it, and she seemed like to put him over too. So I think they had a good relationship, and it was just about sex. But I will only bring that up. They would have been around the same age. They were in college at the same time. But just to say that that's clearly her type. But I don't know. I don't really care if it's true or not. Um, but yeah, anything's possible in wrestling.
And anything's possible. In I can't think of anything to say, but I just want to thank you so much for your time, Hannibal. This was fucking flawless. I don't actually have to edit any of this at all. It's always good actually speaking to a pro because then I actually get good content. Uh, there's no point in plugging your YouTube because it's got something like 520 billion subscribers, but Why don't you plug
About
your
110 million views now, which is, I think actually turn a lot of people off with my subscriber because like it depends if I say something controversial, I lose a bunch. So what I always go by is it has 110 million views, and it's by far there's not even any wrestling channel based in Canada that even comes close. So I am by far the most popular wrestling channel in Canada, the Hannibal TV.
But it is the second best, of course, wrestling YouTube channel. Keeping 100 being number one, but we don't have to bring that up. We spoke about that off my. But listen, I just want to thank you so much for your time and go out and play in that snow.
Yeah, I still haven't done my run today, and it just every week I'm looking at the long-term forecast, and it keeps saying next week is going to be better, but it's the same. And with the lockdown, all I can do is run, so it's very depressing, very, very depressing. But thank you, and everyone, check out thehannibaltv.com for all of our social media links.
Thank you very much, and let's see if we can get Conan on there. We need that sort of shit.
On my channel?
Oh yeah.
Oh, of course. Yeah. People have requested him. I just don't know him. I met him once. Impact was taping at my town back in 2017, and they used me for a match on it to get some extra publicity. So the most I met him at that time was a handshake and a hello, but I did meet him only that one time.
Well, I think this one is a must-have, and he will make a point of getting high, and that's what makes it so good.
Well, weed is legal here in Canada now, so there's nothing wrong with that. And I think it's way better as a guy that's bounced for like 20 years. I'd rather deal with stoned people any day than drug people or people that are on coke or whatever. Those guys are like hell to deal with.
Well, I guess I should have mentioned that I am before the start of this interview, but there you go. Well, I'm going to go top up my buzz, and you have a great day.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
Okay, this was brilliant. Thanks very much.
Cool. You got the sniffles there right at the end. All
uh,
right, buddy. Thanks a lot. If you send me the link when it's up, I'll share it.
you got it. See you soon.
Bye.